Hey guys, welcome. Come on in, come on in. Happy Thursday night. We're just talking about hopefully not getting kicked off the platform before the night's through. We're just talking because whose feedback do I hear? Tara, do I hear your feedback?
I wonder if it is mine. You told me.
All right. So we have two citizen moms tonight. I mean, you guys know Mindy and Tara, who have long fought medical freedom and who are very passionate about this issue, but the most knowledgeable people really in medical freedom out there. And so we were just talking about, wow, this is nothing to celebrate. After 2 years of mandatory masking, the House today passes a bipartisan bill in North Carolina that says, yippee-yi-yay, masks are going to be optional. I'm a cynic. I think you guys are more cynical than I am. I'm thinking, the midterms, that's great. And boy, the House, when you're passing an anti-masking or a mask optional bill at the same time that the most unpopular president in history, Joe Biden, is passing his mask bill, I wonder if our North Carolina legislature has the same approval ratings as the Biden White House with this. What do you guys think?
I mean, for me, I think people are actually confused, to be honest, about which I think it was great that you wanted to have us on to kind of discuss the history of how we got to what happened today. I think there's a lot of celebration out there in the sentiment that somehow the Republicans came through today and really championed freedom and helped get the masks off of our children. And I'm kind of hoping that, just as we walk through the facts, we'll be able to help people understand that today was, something of a victory, but there's a history here that needs to be understood. And moving forward, we're going to have to be diligent in, staying in the fight, because it's certainly not over with
understanding what the consequences are for these last 2 years and accountability for those last 2 years.
Yeah.
Accountability. So Mindy, I want to stop you right there, because here, let me explain to you what happens, the hierarchy of how this happens. Okay, when you have a government, the limited government principles that one party professes over the other, that means this: when you have a limited government and you're following that, you'd never ever make a law that doesn't extend the freedom of the citizens. Every single law, the litmus test is, does this extend the liberty of the citizen? Yes or no? So that's one thing. Another thing is, we've got one party that runs on, we're limited government, except for this: they have delegated all of their duties to administrators, so to agencies, right? And those bureaucrats, the faceless, unelected bureaucrats, are accountable to no one. So the people to blame are the people that your favorite politician, whoever they are, the people that you're going to be voting for the midterms. These are the facts. So I'm going to go ahead and throw up this screen share from you. Shoot, I'm going to try to anyway. Hold on. Okay, I don't even know what I'm doing, guys. I'm going to throw this up. This really blew my mind, where you were telling me that this story came out in July, right? 2020 July. All right. So here's what was going on, right? It was a pandemic, but I think we had gotten through a lot of it, right? We had sort of gone back to work because, again, ding, ding, ding. Why? Because there was an election coming, right? So they allowed us to have a tiny bit of our freedom at schools, right? They weren't masked. And then the North Carolina legislature votes to suspend states' anti-mask rule indefinitely. Can you first start and tell me what that anti-mask rule was? What was it?
Yeah, so for decades, North Carolina actually had a law that,
Speak up a little bit more. So
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So for decades, North Carolina had an anti-mask law is what they called it. It was statute 14-12.11 for anybody that wants to look it up. And basically what that was, it was a North Carolina general statute, which made it illegal to wear a mask in public. I mean, we can talk about the reasons for why many states had anti-mask laws.
Obvious reasons, going into a bank, criminal reasons. Right.
Right. Safety. Right. So on May 2nd, 2020, the North Carolina Republican majority passed Session Law 2020-3. Okay. You can find this under Senate Bill 704.
704. Senate Bill 704. Guys, go to legiscan.com. 2 seconds to get an account. You can research every bill. Tell me that bill again, Tara.
Okay, so it was Session Law 2020-3, Senate Bill 704.
Got it.
Okay, so what this did, now this is interesting. So everybody has to follow the timeline here, right? So it was March of 2020 that the country was shut down and people were told, some of you are essential, some of you are not essential, right?
Kids can't go to school, right? Kids can't go to school.
Right.
Yep. So, we have our 15 days to flatten the curve, became 45 days to flatten the curve. So, May 2nd, 2020, we're still really early on in this thing, and kids are not in school. And there's certainly a sentiment that masks and mask mandates are going to be on the table, right? We've got the CDC floating this idea. It seems, it was 2 years ago. It feels like it was a lifetime ago. But if you just,
but that's after they told us we were morons for thinking that we needed a mask outside of the OR.
Well,
right?
that's exactly right. And actually, we could talk all night long about the studies behind masking, but we all know that if from the very beginning people were pulling out the boxes. And it said right on the box, this mask doesn't prevent the spread of respiratory viruses, including COVID-19. So we always knew, our public health officials, everybody with a brain knew that masks would neither slow nor stop the spread of respiratory viruses.
Even the medical community did. And then they flipped it on its head, thinking that this now all of a sudden outside of a sterile environment, that cloth masks and pieces of material, things that you're shoving in your purses and your pockets are now all of a sudden clean and able to stop respiratory viruses.
So let's go back and so you're saying in May, where
May 2nd, 2020.
So it may be understandable at this point in time in history, right? Mm-hmm. Where the legislature would step in and say, okay, we're going to temporarily,
it was created as an exemption to the state's anti-mask law. That's 14-12.
We get that, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then how do we get to July?
Okay, so this is the most important date in terms of, so what we're going to do here is we're going to go back and forth because it's kind of like Star Wars, right? So for every move that Luke Skywalker makes, you got Darth Vader making one. So the Empire Strikes Back. So the Republican legislature decides they're going to give a little bit on this mask issue. They're going to put in this exemption, but then June 23rd, 2020, Cooper writes an executive order forcing all North Carolina citizens ages 2 and up to wear a mask in all places of public accommodation, right? He put out this whole list. This is Executive Order 147. So Executive Order.
Now we're having, we're going from a law to an executive order. Okay.
And you can see, right? Okay, so everybody has to watch. There's a ping pong tournament going on here where the Republicans are really playing with Cooper, and they're all working towards the same goal ultimately. And you can see it as you start to research what they did. So this Executive Order 147
is the one that told everybody and brought it to the businesses that they were the arm for the age of 2 years and up.
Yeah,
and schools, right?
And schools.
This is because all the parents are tuning in tonight, and they're like, "Okay, hallelujah!" And then I guarantee you, tomorrow morning they're going to be like, "Wait a minute."
Yeah. Children 2 years and up on this particular executive order were required.
But now keep in mind, this is June 26, 2020. It goes into effect at 5:00 p.m. Most kids are not in school at this point, so this was affecting year-round schools. But, so again, What was interesting about Executive Order 147 is it was the first executive order that that involved mandatory masks that actually had teeth to it. So you can look up Executive Order 147, go to the facts and questions under enforcement, okay?
Page 6 and 7.
Yep. And it's going to be the first time that you see that we now have both civil and criminal penalties if you don't wear a mask. So this is a complete flip, right? Because just a couple of months earlier, we're living in a state where wearing a mask is illegal. Now it's not a law, it's an executive order with teeth to it, with actual legal enforcement. But we don't have the protection of the anti-mask law that those of us that didn't want to wear a mask were leaning on. And it was actually the Republicans that took away that protection. Okay.
So both parties were complicit.
Yeah. Here's where it gets super fascinating. So for those of us following this in medical freedom, what we understood is that under the original exemption, there was an expiration date. The anti-mask law was always set to go back into effect August 1st, 2020. So, Mindy and I and the medical freedom teams, we're thinking to ourselves, well, this is horrific, right? We live in a state, we've just literally lost the right to go out into public without putting a face diaper on. We've lost the right to make medical decisions for ourselves. But the light at the end of the tunnel and the way that we stayed optimistic was
we were going to go back.
It was going to go away.
We all thought that kids would be able to go, and parents said, okay, the first year, it was, I guess, understandable, annoying. This year has been downright cruel and punitive.
Well, I would argue that it was cruel and punitive from day one, because if you actually followed the studies that were coming out of Germany, we know that 20 minutes in a mask actually causes permanent neurological damage to a child. So, I mean, you can go 20 minutes, you can go a year, you can go 2 years.
And think of all the cognitive development that has declined.
The damage.
The suicide rate is up. I mean, I want to tell you guys something. So thank God that we have so many wonderful teachers. I mean, teachers by and large are not your enemy. We have so many that come to us, that talk to us, that we help out. And we're actually a shoulder for them to cry on here with our members, because they can't get this information out. But yesterday we were messaged from a school counselor in Charlotte that we talk to frequently. And she is treating 4 4th grade boys for attempted suicide.
We know people from last year that contacted us that their actual children did commit suicide. So, there are consequences, and they're deadly.
They're deadly.
Yeah, they're deadly.
Yeah, and it's heartbreaking. So now what's really, really important for North Carolinians to understand is
what they took away with that August 1st.
Yeah. What happened to the anti-mask law coming back into place August 1st?
So let's talk about that for a second, because I'm that
was a law that was in effect from like the 1970s. It's always been there.
Okay. So we understand the suspension. We got it. We're cool. Okay. Yep. But the permanency gave Cooper the power to do this. Now, let me just play devil's advocate. Is it possible that the legislature thought that another governor that I can't name would be in charge? Or, I mean, it's improper, period. No one should have that authority, right? Permanent. But could it be that they maybe misjudged who would win the election?
We thought about that, and we've actually asked any number of legislators to explain to us what happened on July 8th, 2020. So let me talk about that, and then I'll answer your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
On July 8th, 2020, really unbeknownst to everybody in medical freedom and all of us that were down there on the streets, right, protesting at Reopen, we had no idea that on July 8th, 2020, the Republican majority, using Senate 232 as the vehicle, was going to permanently suspend the state's anti-mask law.
It
happened
forever.
actually. Yeah, we were told it happened at around 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah, in the middle of the nights when they do this.
Yeah. And so now all of the sudden, that light at the end of the tunnel that was supposed to happen on August 1st, it's gone.
And the only way to get this back is to have new legislation. Again, it is gone forever.
So let's walk through the litmus test that I just gave. Because on the one hand, you know, every law should extend freedom for the citizens. That should be the litmus test. Mm-hmm. If it does not, it's an overreach. So one could say, well, public safety, true public safety is an exception, right? So one could say that, okay, I'm going to suspend the anti-mask law. That is going to extend freedom. And I guess it would. Freedom to wear masks or whatever, mm-hmm. right? But what happens is this, guys, there's law and there's policy and there's rules, right? And so you have that law that would enable a tyrant to make the rule. Now, the thesis from the Republicans, look, this is not a political show, right? But the thesis from the side that did it is, wow, this guy's tyrannical. How dare he? And what you're saying is, well, if he is, then why give him the latitude to do this, correct?
And to answer your question about whether or not they thought another governor was going to come in, let's think this through, okay? They did this July 8th, 2020. Had the other governor that we're talking about been sworn in, he would have taken office when?
January.
Right.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Okay.
So now we have just handed Cooper, 8 solid months in which you can mask the people and the children of North Carolina.
Condition them.
Exactly. Conditioning them. You know, even if there was going to be a different governor that was, you know, sworn in the following January, why would they have given Cooper the latitude to mask the citizens and the children of North Carolina for that amount of time versus allowing the anti-mask law to go? This is how simple this would have been. They could have allowed the anti-mask law to go back into play on August 1st with one simple caveat. They could have written an amendment that said, the statute's back in play. It's against the law for any citizen in North Carolina to leave the house with a mask on and to wear a mask publicly, unless that citizen believes that a mask would benefit them in staying safe from XYZ, right? You could have actually extended liberty to the citizens of this state on all sides. There was a reason they didn't do that. There was a reason that the Republicans worked so collaboratively with Cooper to put the masks on us.
Why?
You tell me.
There's always a reason. There's always a reason.
Game. We've never been able to get them to tell us what the reason was.
Well, we've made assumptions that we were supposed to basically beg for them to come back and save us. And
have you looked at Sheila? You just said the right thing. Money, follow the money. So now we know in schools that there are dollars tied to that, much dollars, right? The DHHS has made contracting directly with the feds, right from the feds to different school systems in North Carolina, and the parents didn't know this. They were going up every other week or whenever these meetings were held to try to unmask their children. Couldn't do it because they didn't know, damn, my school's been federalized. We have no power. We have it taken away. So not only has my power as a parent been taken by the administrative state is the federal government now.
Yeah.
Well, if you realize this new law that he's getting ready to sign, this is every year you have to put an actual exemption for this. And as Tara and I were talking, it's 2 parts. It's really an aggressive assault on the parents' rights.
So what you're saying is, are you telling me that every year they need to put an amendment to the anti-masking thing that they permanently rescinded?
Well, so let's talk about that. So what they did today was they passed Senate Bill 173, and there was this huge celebration, right? We were getting all kinds of texts. Oh my goodness, the Republicans finally are championing.
They came and saved us, right?
Yeah, they came and saved us. And of course, most of the people that were texting us did not actually understand that it was the Republicans that suspended the state's anti-mask law.
Right. So you're giving us our freedom back. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
So thank you for giving us our basic freedom back and our parental.
You took away. Yeah. So it's an absolute, you know, for those, one of the things that we're really asking people to engage in at this point is understanding how we got to where we were, how we got to where we are today, and go back and look at everything the North Carolina General Assembly has done since March of 2020 and ask yourself whether or not they actually upheld their oaths to the Constitution.
Did they extend liberty?
Well, no one else is getting their masks off right now. I mean, that is the bottom line. You have colleges, patrons, and employees. There's nothing different going on there.
Yeah. So today, you know, we were getting all these texts. Oh my goodness, it's over. We succeeded in getting the masks off the kids. So let's actually talk about what happened today. Okay. So Senate Bill 173, it was passed with bipartisan support, right? It was, you know, originally the Free the Smiles Act. They added 115.c, and this is what it says. It says that parents have the discretion to decide for themselves whether or not they will submit a mask exemption for their children to go to schools, and that the exemption has to be submitted annually. What does that tell you about
what?
Yep.
Yes.
Read the language.
Okay, wait, stop. Okay, I'm telling you guys, because we deal with this every day, 20 times a day. Do you know that what they're doing it again? These legislators are turning this over to agencies, in this case, district schools, so that they can have arbitrary decisions on this. We have people time and time again say, I submitted this thing from a doctor, etc. It was not honored. And so now they're saying that if schools decide they're going to honor your exemption, they're going to have to decide. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, what's fascinating is what the law does is the law says the parents have the right to decide whether or not they're going to mask their children, which, interestingly enough, why is the Republican Party championing a law making child abuse optional? Like, I still can't figure that out. I mean,
so wait a minute.
There's still children who are going to go around maybe in rooms that 50% of the children are masks, so that they have faceless, you know, students with them in the classroom. We were talking about this earlier. There are predators in the schools. Children are as well. Sexual assault happens on school buses, things like that. They are still going to have parents that are not educated, who are still going to be masking their children, who are still going to be in these classrooms with your children.
I know, Mindy, but honestly, I do know, and we're all very passionate about this.
Yeah.
But you know, giving it over to parental choice is, you know, the right way to go, and if parents want to do that. But I'm trying to understand this. So, guys, if this bill says that a family has a right to
submit an exemption,
but the default position is children will be masked.
The default position is that children are default
position. Yes. Okay. I'm going to read this because I'm about to lose my SH right now.
So basically what it says, and the word that stuck out to us was annually, that the parents would submit the mask exemption for their children annually.
You will beg for your freedom annually. The default position is permanent masking.
Well, and yes.
Insane.
Yeah, and actually what is fascinating, now let's roll this back. The suspension of the state's anti-mask law using Senate Bill 232 was a permanent suspension, which is a repeal. Okay. So had the Republicans not suspended the state's anti-mask law permanently, we would never have been in the position today to now be looking at having to submit an exemption to a childhood mask mandate annually.
Because now they have made it into law.
But here's the deal, guys. Okay, let's say, you know, mistakes are made, they can be overcome, and you're not going to find any politician that's going to say, I made a mistake. But what you're telling me is actually they're going to make masking the status quo, and that you're going to have to ask your school for an exemption, because an exemption doesn't mean, okay, I have an exemption, and so now I'm not masking.
Well, you've got metrics, right? Aren't they saying there's metrics?
The law supposedly that was passed today gives parents the authority and the discretion to assert a
that
mask
they're not going to mask their child.
But to your point,
you have to opt out. You have to opt out.
You do.
No masking. Okay,
but that's what I'm saying. There's parents out there that aren't even educated to understand the harm psychologically, physically, like you're talking about with the suicide, that are still going to continue to mask their children. There's still that choice. And that's the psychological harm and what's already happened.
And nobody is actually talking about the harms of the children who were not masked.
It's great for the educated parent that will choose for their child to not be masked. But what about the ones that don't have that access to
but also what about the cognitive and the social emotional development of the children?
Here's what I think. I'm no fan of the superintendent. In fact, I think she's derelict in her duty in almost every respect. But the fact that she isn't using her bully pulpit to say, guys, here's this study. Here, Florida stopped using the mask a year ago. Here's the science they leaned upon. But you don't even have anyone using their bully pulpit until they're too busy backslapping today.
For all children, this needs to protect all children. It's great that there's a choice, but all children are being harmed, and
no one's using their bully pulpit. So if you took the mask off today, why? Explain that. Don't say it's parental choice. For God's sakes, use the science because it's there.
But you still have half the children that are going to continue to be masked. Those are the ones that why we are the voice for the voiceless, why we are all essential, why we have been in this for 2 years. It is wonderful that we are getting some inches here, but this is the big picture. All children are innocent and they're being preyed upon. And that is the part that the legislators are not fighting for. They're not fighting for all children.
Right. So Maggie thinks that we're segregationists, right? They use the playbook of parent choice. Now she's saying that about us, that we're segregationists.
No, masks are segregationists. You're masking people to segregate them, and you're harming them psychologically as well.
Maggie, we can't tell if you're throwing shade on us or not. Right?
Well, understanding the science as well.
No, she's saying segregationists pushed parents' choice too.
Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, I think she's throwing shade. Oh, okay. We're using their playbook. Okay, wait a minute. So Maggie, let's help you. We're racist. We're white supremacists. We're white privilege. Go on. All right. So we're pushing their playbook. So Maggie's probably a teacher. She's probably a progressive teacher. And she wants a forever mask, right?
Right.
And she can't see that having some children masked and other children not masked, that is the segregation?
Right.
And that faceless children aren't developing and the harm that it's doing.
Oh, libertarian. Maggie calls that a libertarian. This is Maggie, girl, I'm glad you're on the show tonight. I'm telling you, I just had abdominal surgery, so I'm trying not to laugh, but you about to make me laugh. You think that libertarians are against parental choice? You need to pull your head out of somewhere, girl. No. That's called fascism.
No, to that point, I do not believe that.
Maggie's upset at the accusation of predators. Oh, Maggie.
Oh, you need to know
so she does not actually believe that inside public schools, there are both employees, adults, and students who are using the masks as a shield to perpetuate sexual abuse.
Happens mainly on school buses and in bathrooms.
Before the masks, and now that it's being emboldened by the mask because you can prey on children without being identified.
It's always happened in schools.
Because this is the sort of pushback. The reason why I let her on, the pushback that you're going to get from people, it is this, it's this kind of stuff where
until you've had children sexually assaulted, it doesn't exist, right?
Right. Well, I want you to know that last full school year, sexual assaults in Wake County were up 28%. And then they decided to let boys go into the girls' bathrooms. And so you're right. I mean, all of these things, again, they are taking away not only parental rights, but, the most essential freedom we have is of your conscience, right? And if you're not allowed to
that's fascinating, Sloan, that you just said that last year, which was the first year that we've ever had masks on children in schools, sexual assaults were up 28%.
While the attendance was down like 20%. So you had less people there.
Does that not actually prove the hypothesis that masks embolden predatory behavior? Because you can actually assault someone with a mask on without fear of being identified?
Well, do you know what? Think about your young children. They can't identify anybody with a mask on. These are your elementary children. This happens all the time. All the time.
Guns are up tremendously. There's all kinds of, different things. And you're right. Without a mask, it's very difficult to tell. Hell, it's probably very difficult to tell if someone that's not a student is on here. So look, you're right. So if the anti-law was in place to protect public safety, and the legislators knew that, and they all agree with it, and it's been in place since the 70s, then why do they think it's any safer to do this in schools? So you're correct.
We've asked this question. We have asked.
We sat before them, all of them, pretty much.
Have you looked at the crime data since the mask has become a norm?
And they don't know what to say to that. We've brought this to their attention. They just say, well,
we need to, I'm going to write here on my handy dandy that we need to research that. And we'll have something for you next week. Let's look at how the crime data has gone up, because I'm going to tell you something. Every other day I'm reading about a sexual predator that is a teacher. So,
but it's not only teachers, it's students too that do this.
Oh, yeah.
Don't be fooled.
How much more emboldened is a predator when the predator knows he or she cannot be identified? And so we actually have sat with sheriff's candidates and asked the question, can you show us the crime data in the last year in your county, inside your schools? We would like to see the violent assault and the sexual assaults and whether or not there's a correlation between the masks and the crime. And do you know that we have yet to have they just keep telling us they don't have the data.
They don't have the data.
Let's go back to legislators now who are patting themselves on the back because they think that they've given us our freedom back.
Their constitutional freedoms.
But look, no matter what your party, all of these guys understood, and gals, all of them understood that the anti-mask law was there for a reason. It protected the citizenry. They perfectly accepted that. And so how can they think that taking it out for 2 years in schools while really not using their bully pulpit to do anything? I honestly haven't heard anyone on the Republican side. And again, this is not a political show, but the Republicans claim to be the party of extending freedom, correct? All right.
Right. They took our freedoms and now they're giving it back. Is it ridiculous?
Anyone besides the lieutenant governor use their bully pulpit to talk about the safety risk. He uses his bully pulpit for that, but I haven't heard anyone else. But I do hear them after Connecticut and all these liberal places have already rescinded the mask. Now they come in and say that. Right. Lisa, you're absolutely right. The masks were a temporary issue. They go on, they go off. The fundamental thing is this.
You keep them indoctrinated, right? Just like she's bringing it up, the CRT, the surveys, the emotional social learning, the thing that you are constantly on top of. That's why unfortunately, a lot of people don't care for us because we're abolitionists to this particular indoctrination system, the public schools, because of everything that they're continuing to do. Right. Get your mask off your children and let them continue to become communists, really, and their minds are going to be brainwashed.
Right. I mean, Mao closed the schools, if you recall.
Yes.
And then he made the schools so that they would train a Red Army. And to do that, the fundamental key, you guys have to remember this, you must remove the innocence of children as quickly as you can. You must do that. And you do it by perhaps masking, but definitely racializing and sexualizing the children. It's a plan. Okay. I'm not sure it's going to work. I think we're going to thwart it. And we are. Believe me when I tell you we are. San Francisco Mayor London Breed today or yesterday after getting 3 hardcore leftist school board members thrown out. She said, listen, we've got to get back to educating the kids. I mean, they're worried about naming the schools different names that may not be offensive while kids can't even read. I mean, enough's enough. I think
it's about trying to get these children caught up that have missed 2 years behind masks or at home trying to sit behind screens. What are they doing for that?
It's a sin. What we're looking at,
yeah,
it's just insane. And, you know, there needs to be a priority of getting kids back to their learning lesson. Now, look, I can't understand what the hell people are saying when they have their mask on. So please don't tell me, guys, that, oh, people can read just fine with the masks, right?
Well, they're still denying medical care if you don't put one on. I mean, my mother today went in for a cardiac aversion and they still masked her and she's having problems breathing, but she had to have it on to get through the hospital to get to the back room.
Well, I think a lot of children, and I think a lot of children also, you know, have problems, right? Where they're not able to, you know,
we interviewed those that they had medical conditions. They could not mask. We had people who've called us that their husbands were intubated and they wouldn't let them come in for transfusions without masking somebody who's intubated in a wheelchair.
Right. Well, I mean, and you know, getting back to the schools and things, I mean, we've got, you know, children that are, you know, hearing loss children and they have to have a mask on and, you know,
medical and disabilities.
Look, we're glad there's, I mean, I don't know that I'm glad after I'm talking to you because what I'm hearing about this bill really
there's a solution. We could actually go back and reinstate the anti-mask law so that this doesn't continue to be law that we have to ask every year.
We have to ask for
to not put a mask on our face when there was a law that protected us before.
So let me get this straight. I mean, these legislators aren't dumb. They know that parents are having a hell of a time here at the local level, getting administrators to be willing to take
they've dealt with the protests and the parents and the school boards for 2 years.
But this bill, and I have not read this, but I trust you. This bill is saying, hey, now we're going to say that you cannot wear the mask if your school says it's okay.
No. You cannot wear the mask as long as the parents submit an exemption to the mask.
Educated parent.
Yeah. So what it does is it does give the authority to the parents to send their children to school without a mask on, but the parent has to submit an annual exemption that states, I do not want my child to be masked while in school. The thing that stood out to us.
This never ends. This never ends.
Forever masking.
Yes.
I want you to understand what we're saying here. If this is a bill, this is a law.
It is law.
Today they have enshrined that masking is the norm.
Yes.
This pisses me off.
Because of their use of the word annual. It was very strange. And so the other thing that stood out about that to us is that when you look at vaccine exemptions and public education and North Carolina statutes 138 to 157,
and religious exemptions and medical exemptions, those are done pretty much once in a lifetime.
One and done. Yeah. And so you submit this exemption and you state, you know, this is what I want to be put into my child's file, and it goes in there. So even as someone who, I mean, I homeschooled, so I'm not submitting anything, you know, to government schools. But if my children had gone to government schools, the law states that I would have been one and done. I am unaware of any parent that has ever been told that every single year they have to reissue a medical or a religious exemption for vaccines. So to have read that there has to be an annual mask exemption, it was shocking to us. We had not seen language like that previously.
Right, but think about the parents today now that learned that they did not have to actually submit their children to vaccines if they really didn't believe it. They thought they were forced to go to schools. There were always exemptions in place, and the educated parents opted out. There will be parents that will not opt out of this because they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I'm saying.
Okay.
This is what all encompassing that does not
Because
protect
the
the innocence of our children.
The baseline is masking forever.
Yes, and what the harm and the long-term repercussions of conditioning the mind for the socialism, communism, indoctrination of that alone, on top of the CRT and everything else that comes in along with these government systems. This is the bridge to all of it as well. But this is also the part that doesn't get out to the majority of the people. You have to have lion mamas and bears, and papa bears, and people who are really plugged in that understand that there's an option. Now, maybe this will go viral. Maybe children will start talking. Maybe they'll say, well, you have to talk to your children to say, tell your best friend, tell your friends that your mommy and daddy can put an exemption, or grandma or your guardian can put an exemption for you. And hopefully, because this should not be accepted as the norm, that will be a possibility that we can get that out there to educate people, just like we need to educate what Big Pharma has been doing to us for many years. We don't go into that. But.
And ultimately, people always ask us, well, what is a solution to this? The solution really is to go back to your legislators and ask them to reinstate North Carolina General Statute 14-12.11, which is the state's, decades-old anti-mask law.
Yep. Reinstate
it. If we could get the very legislators to reinstate that law,
then this makes this that they have to, right? That they have to go back every 90 days and reevaluate. That they can't make this a permanent situation.
Yeah, and so at the end of the day, we could actually not only permanently get the masks off of children, we could permanently get the masks off of North Carolina employees, North Carolina college students, North Carolina healthcare providers, recipients of North Carolina healthcare.
All of that has a string attached to when they got rid of that anti-mask law.
Yeah,
that keeps it honest at our businesses. Look how many people
we could reinstate the anti-mask law, all of this goes away. Of course, the reason we were told that they could not reinstate it is because Cooper wouldn't sign it. So isn't that fascinating that we
could get Cooper to get painted in a corner by a nonpartisan issue that makes this law that we have to every year submit to?
Yeah. So what we have said was, well, you guys were the Republican majority that suspended it. So you need to be the Republican majority that figures out how to re-implement it. Now, I personally do not believe we will ever live in a North Carolina that ever again has a anti-mask law. But
I have to say that, now that there's a season, right, that people appear to be motivated, correct? Do you think we can do that?
I think what scares me is that, the feedback that we got today was that this is over and that this was a win.
It's not true.
It's not. And that this was a win and that now everybody can stand down. And the other thing that we want to point out here, actually two things. Number one, they're already floating a new virus, right? The next pandemic. We're already hearing whisperings of Marburg. You can look this up. They're floating that the Marburg virus has been, found in China, and now there are a couple of cases of it in Britain, and it is a hemorrhagic fever, and it's very, very bad. It's an Ebola-like virus. Okay, and I'm sure that there are more viruses down the pipeline that the government plans to either unleash on us or say are out there, so that there will be, more suspensions of the Constitution and civil liberty. That said, do we actually believe that the law that was put in place today could not be as quickly repealed as the anti-mask law was repealed in July by the same set of legislators? So, our call to action is, don't just give up today as a victory and this is the end, we won. Keep demanding that we go back to the anti-mask law and that never again, under any circumstances, will we submit to the idea that our constitutional rights are somehow severable in the event of an emergency. Because
Right.
I don't believe that this is the last pandemic.
So I want to put this up here
Yeah.
for you to comment on. So this is a citizen who is commenting on Representative Keith Kidwell. I believe he's the chair of the Freedom Caucus. If he's the chair of the Freedom Caucus, we're in deep, you know what. She's saying this is great, but it should have been a long time ago. You know,
Keith Kidwell said that it was no different than wearing a tie to make his employees, you know.
So let's talk about this.
Yeah.
He says he's been trying for nearly 2 years. I haven't been aware. I haven't heard him take to his bully pulpit ever.
There has not been a single bill that has been presented by the Republican majority in either the House or the Senate to pass through committee that gets the masks off of North Carolinians or North Carolina children under any circumstances. So I don't actually know what Keith is talking about. We
presented 558 to try to stop all of this coming, and they killed it in the House. And Keith Kidwell was the part of that.
But 558 was actually
to stop the private and the
it was
public
about vaccines.
sector.
So there hasn't been any movement on masks.
You know what? Again, this isn't political. Freedom isn't political. Parental choice isn't political. Am I onto something here? I mean,
well,
you know,
unfortunately, the only reason I would agree with you that it's not political is because both sides are sort of working to crush us and destroy our freedom equally. So I guess it's not necessarily political in terms of, you know, there being a dichotomy here. The Constitution isn't political. That I can get behind. Yeah. The truth is not political.
No,
right?
It's not.
And I think that's where, our message over and over again, everywhere we speak, is 2 years ago, many of us fell into the trap, and the trap was this: your constitutional rights can be suspended if you can be convinced that there is a good enough reason, right? They can take away our freedom of movement. They can take away our jobs.
Our education.
Essentials,
right.
Education. They can take away your freedom
to choose.
Yes,
under this guise,
whether or not you want to wear a medical device on your face.
Mm-hmm.
They can take away your freedom to choose what you do or don't want injected into your body. And the only criteria is whether or not people who work for three-letter word government agencies and people who sit in state houses and in Congress believe that there is a good enough reason or a big enough emergency
or a big enough dollar figure
to take away your rights. And interestingly enough, we remind people of this all the time. The Constitution was actually written during a smallpox pandemic that had an infection fatality rate of about 30%. Okay, nowhere do you see in the Constitution a clause that says we are guaranteed certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, unless there's a pandemic. And at
that they would be suspended.
time, this is all suspended.
Okay, our legislators don't know that.
No, they don't.
So let me show you something.
And that's why you need legislators that know their state constitution, the federal constitution, and the ones that have been upholding it and the ones that haven't.
Not to pick on Keith, and again, oh, dang it. Oh, no. I lost my screen. Hold on, I'm going to have to get it again. I don't want to pick on any one person. Again, I'm telling you guys, this is not a political statement. This is about solving problems, right? We're all about giving
individual liberties.
Individual liberties, and they've been crushed. They've been crushed for children and for families, and it's real repercussions.
Every human being. That's right. We need to be the voice for all of the voiceless, the people who do not understand.
That's right. So this is the big hallelujah. Parents deserve the right to opt out of mask mandates. So this is what everybody is.
So what this does is this affirms that the government had the right to implement the mandate in the first place, and that the parent
had no choice,
and that the parent is somehow a second tier authority over the child. To affirm that government ever had the right to implement a mask mandate in the first place is what causes us to recognize we have a real problem in North Carolina with constitutional literacy.
Yes.
And putting permanent law into it. They didn't suspend and put 30, 90-day increments on it. They just wiped it away, made it a law.
Do you know what Keith's thing here should say? It should say, today the House is voting on legislation that reinstated the state's anti-mask law because the government never had a right to mask children in the first place.
But that's not true, because the baseline, guys, is all children should be masked, according to your interpretation of the legislation. All children should be masked, and you parents are going to have to ask a bureaucrat, which, by the way, we've seen some of those. You're going to have to ask them if you can opt out. Let me read this. Today, the House is voting on legislation that empowers parents to choose. So they're acting like they're giving you an extra right.
Yeah.
Well, they're acting like they're giving you back something they took away, and no one is standing up saying, wait a minute, you didn't have a right to take it away in the first place.
They violated us in the first place.
You guys, I am.
His post right there affirms everything we just told you. He said the legislation gives you the right to opt out of the new norm, which is permanent mask mandates.
So guys, we may be in the minority because we're not, popping bottles here, right? And having fun, because this is a mockery.
It's not over.
It's perfectly tuned for the midterms. And so, again, this is.
Wait, on that note, Sloan.
Political grandstanding.
Do you think it was funny that the Republicans, the timing was fascinating. The same day that Cooper came out and said, we need to back all this stuff up.
Oh, golly.
The Republicans on the exact same day said, we need to give parents choice. Does anyone see that the timing is completely perfect?
And in fact, we spoke about this. We said you waited 2 years.
Y'all, to be fair,
I
think Tim Moore did hint that this was going to happen. To be fair,
a couple years
last week. Yeah, no, last week.
We hinted 2 years ago and a year ago that this is what they would do. They would come back around and look like they're saving the day in political grandstand.
We actually got a tip 2 years ago from a Republican insider that the plan from the very beginning of COVID was for North Carolina Republicans to stand down for 2 years, to allow us to be crushed under the weight of Cooper's tyranny for 2 years while they did nothing, so that by 2022, we would be so crushed and so desperate that we would run to the polls in the primaries and give them the supermajority and view them as the champions of liberty who would swoop in and save us from Cooper. And I have to say, is this not exactly what we're witnessing?
Well, yeah.
And if you're going to go back to the polls, if we think voting even matters, that's when you need to look at what people have done to put us in this position.
As we always say, we're talking about school policy here. Yeah. They've made it political. We haven't made it political. They've made it political. So unfortunately, we have to dive into these waters.
We're just observing what they did, right?
Both parties are complicit.
You know what it is? It's us versus them. If they're not going to extend the liberty to us, and they're going to play games. I mean,
you can't extend something that God gave me. The Constitution affirms our God-given liberty, right? Government does not give you your freedom. God gives you freedom, and we were fortunate enough to have been born in a country where freedom was our birthright because we had founders who affirmed that which God gave us.
And the Constitution was based on that.
And if anybody who believes that the government can give you freedom also has to acknowledge that same government can take it away. So never forget, our founders affirmed that which God gave us. I will live free and I will die free, but I will never buy into the idea that government can either grant me or take away my freedom.
And that's why I will never comply to this or put my children in that, because of that reason.
She says, now we are just pissed off more. You know what Mindy says? She says, when we go speak, we typically either piss off the room or rally the pissed off. And so, I hope that tonight we've rallied the pissed off, because we just cannot take what happens today.
I want to tell you something. The last time that I went to one of your medical programs, it was great. I started taking vitamin D and vitamin K, and my doctor's like, look, whatever you've done, dude, that is awesome. So,
also understanding children, there's literally a zero factor of any of them getting sick. So these masks are making them sick psychologically and physically. But number two, nobody needs to die if you understand what the life-saving therapeutics are. So get in touch with us, because let me tell you, you don't want to end up in a hospital, because you probably walk out.
For medical freedom, there is no one better. I can tell you right now, you don't know what these two women have done for us, for the people of North Carolina, and what they've been through. And I really want to tell people, you guys the last year worked tirelessly. You paid for lobbyists. You did everything possible. These are the experts.
We're all essential. We are all God's children.
That's right. You went toe to toe with Keith Kidwell and others, and you were willing to do whatever it took to unmask our children. And so you guys were the first. You were the first on this, and I salute you.
Well, we're all essential. Every human being. It does not matter what your belief system is. It doesn't matter what your political system is. None of that matters. I was always 100% in this, because I saw the harm that was coming. I've seen the harm from the past, from our medical background,
You've studied it. You've studied it.
So
you've lived it. You know it.
The harm. I never cared about what anybody's political stance or even religious beliefs are. I just know what my heart and what I believe as my moral compass was to do, is to be the light in the darkness, to be transparent about the lies, and to stand on the truth. We come with receipts. We can absolutely back up everything that we've ever presented. 100%.
Yeah. Amen. And all of us, look, the truth, it scares the hell out of people, but you have an obligation not only to tell the truth, but to speak it as loudly as possible everywhere you can. Here's why. Because everyone around you, will think, some of them will think, you mean I'm not crazy? I'm not the only one who thinks this, right? You have an obligation to tell the truth. So
we have a duty to stand between wickedness.
We do.
Restrain wickedness.
And Mindy and I are very unapologetic about the fact that we're followers of Christ. Yes. And, the Bible teaches that the Christian's highest virtue is truth. And so, we've really, taken heat in terms of some of the positions that we've taken on masks and vaccines, but they're all rooted in absolute fact. We've never, taken quote unquote emotional positions. And when you look at the science, the true science, not the revisionist politicized science that kind of discounts everything that we knew to be true prior to 2020. There is absolutely nothing about a mask that is anything but harmful to children and adults. And so, and there is, you look at we talked about this in a previous live, I think, that got taken down.
You're going to get my ass kicked off of every platform.
I was going to say, odds of you surviving this one are not good, but the same thing is true about the COVID-19 vaccine program for children. That is not something that parents should just blindly obey. Do your research, check out the VAERS data, make sure that you are making informed decisions. And one of the things
informed consent. They're not giving the ingredients. None of this is informed consent. Yeah. It's still under PUA.
What struck me early on in this whole COVID narrative is somebody said to me, our grandparents' generation, they really were the greatest generation. There was such wisdom. They knew how to cure things without going to a doctor. They just had, they were able to apply logic and common sense to everything. Right. If masks would have stopped the spread of respiratory viruses, we would have known long before 2020, and our grandmothers would have said, "Listen, this is how you deal with anything that is spread, in the respiratory tract. Of course, something shifted in 2020. And, we said from day one, the mask was never about stopping the spread of a virus. It was about teaching compliance.
It was
submission and really
divisiveness.
And
it has divided.
And it has. And at the end of the day, we were told, it was interesting. If you go back and you look at commercials from early in 2020, we were told 6 weeks in that we were never going to come out the other side, right? There was a new normal. That was what was being promoted. So when we looked at this piece of legislation today, we realized, oh my goodness, they used the word annually to describe the way that this exemption would be submitted. And all it did was reaffirm that even our Republican legislators have embraced the idea that we are not ever going back to anything pre-2020, and that indeed there is going to be a new normal, and the new normal is going to be masking for children unless you opt out. We cannot let this be the future for our children. We have to reclaim logic. We have to reclaim facts, and we have to stop
natural law. Natural law. Man was not meant to live this way.
That's right. That's right. And so, was today a victory? In a very, very small part, it was a victory. But I would say it was one tiny little battle, and there's so much more work to do.
I think it was a slap in the face. I'm sorry. I think today, based on what you're telling me, it was a slap in the face. We have to learn to live glass half full, because while it was a slap in the face, the good I see is that at least some children now, right, are no longer going to be deoxygenated and are no longer going to be, suffer all of the physical and emotional and cognitive harms of them. I mean, we're talking to experts that are telling us that there is now a tremendous amount of plastic surgery going on, because after all of this time in masks, there are the ears of children that are developing have been pulled forward. And so now the surgeries that are done to pin ears back are, through the roof. We're talking to parents whose children are experiencing speech delays. Yes, a lot. We get that a lot. We get it a lot.
Yeah, all kinds
of damage is already done. Kelly's right, but
Kelly, you're right.
Think about how many schools and how many districts we have, and you have maybe a small amount of children that will be able to know about taking these masks off. What are the repercussions for the ones that will take them off? We already hear from the parents when they have fought and got one school or one classroom to let their child go without a mask, and the bullying that's going on because their child isn't wearing a mask. So if you've got 5 kids out of a room of 25, what do you think that's going to do to those?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to, thank Kelly here. Kelly, she has a Free the Smiles, a great organization.
Been watching her
working so hard for this, and then. I think it's a bait and switch we got today. I'm telling you guys, I'm really pissed.
You just have to read the fine print.
We're going to read the fine print.
I think anytime you see Republicans champion a bill in which parents have to annually opt out of a mask mandate, you have a problem. I mean, it's, this stuff is not rocket science.
And I'm worried about the ones that aren't going to opt out because they don't know about it. There are so many people going to be left behind, just like the ones that don't know about therapeutics. There are so many people that didn't know they could opt out with medical and religious exemptions.
Yeah.
The general public generally doesn't get all the information because what are the taglines?
They're not following this. But listen, ladies, at least we've got people like Kelly in the ground. And, so many others who are, out there working with the parents. I mean, we've got ground troops everywhere that are, saying that, this is great. Yeah. So, right. Yeah, right. Kelly, exactly. I mean, so it's public education, and it's,
Just keep educating. Exactly. That's why we say canvas, take flyers, inform the public, put the prophylactics, talk about the mask studies. They're all out there. It is something that we boots on the ground have to do because the media is not going to do it. The alternative media, which is us, will do it. But we need to take our $25 lattes or whatever you do a week and go make some copies.
Look,
and then
I want to show you this again. Don't believe the hype. Is that what you're telling me based on what you've read? I'll be honest, I haven't read the bill, but you're telling me don't believe.
Keith affirms it right here. He says it gives parents the ability to opt out of school masking mandates. It doesn't say that they're doing away with school masking mandates.
It's right there.
It's right there.
The schools,
you can right to your face.
You can keep your mandate.
Yeah.
School.
You can keep an unconstitutional, immoral mandate, but now and so we're going to affirm the mandate, but give parents the right to opt out. That's what happens.
Mandates are not gone.
Right.
Wow. So, we need a PAC called Concerned Citizens of North Carolina, and we need to get active here. So we'll talk about
a lot of us that are active
on the next. Yes,
yep.
we will talk about that on the next show when we can. I will, and we'll talk about that on the next show where that will be under a different account that we can talk. So, I love you. You know I do.
We love you.
I mean,
we love North Carolina. We love being the voice for the voiceless. And let me tell you, 2:00 in the morning, if you called us and you needed something, we answer our phone and we help anybody. And it doesn't matter what your background is.
Yeah, always. So would you do me a favor? Type into the comment box your Telegram channels, how to get a hold of you and stuff. I want to post it up here. So
you know how to do that, Mindy?
Yeah.
So because you've got a great Telegram channel, newsletter too, right?
Newsletter is in the works.
Okay. Put that look, I've been making a list. Where's my list? Since we've been talking. Yeah. It's pretty full. So of things we need to do. I have to tell you, look over this bill. We'll look over it. We'll probably write something up over the weekend. But again, schools are still going to keep the mandates. We're not going to take control of that. By the way, you know who has control over the schools? The legislature.
Mm-hmm.
The legislature does. And so, I'm not sure that this is probably cold comfort to the parents in districts like Orange and Durham and Wake, where they're going to tell you, go pound sand. Yeah, I'll show you where to stick that exemption letter, right? And then what?
It's going to be really hard. It'll be interesting to see the school systems that do keep the mask mandates in place. Of course, you're seeing, now that Brandon is scurrying and of course, Cooper is trying to peel stuff back. I'll actually be fascinated to see which school systems continue to play this game, because we're really seeing these. The mandates are really dropping, people who are double vaxxed and boosted. But at the end of the day, if, some of these school systems do hold on to them, it'll be fascinating to see whether or not they actually obey the law that says that parents have the discretion to determine whether or not they're going to send their children to school without a mask, or whether or not they're going to make those parents jump through some kind of a hoop, right? Is this going to be an easy one and done? I just write a note. My child is not going to. Now, I will tell you, this is fascinating. I had a conversation a couple of days ago with a parent in Cumberland County, and there was a note that went in as the child had a recognized medical exemption, very nonverbal autistic. And a note went to school along with the approved medical exemption that the child was absolutely not to be masked. And the child got off the school 2 days ago with a mask on. And phone calls were made asking how that happened, and nobody really had any answers.
So, all right. So we're going to be dealing with this in perpetuity, to your point, permanently. And when it needs to be fake rescinded for political purposes, then that's what they're going to do.
That's why we love you, Sloan. Your exposure of your investigative reporting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, to your point, it'll be very interesting to see whether or not the school systems that cling to the mask mandates are actually going to honor a parent sending in an exemption, or if there is going to be a some sort of threshold.
Well, no, tomorrow.
We will, and of course, I think that forevermore we'll be hearing stories about students that were sent to school with this exemption and come out of school with masks on, because it's been happening with kids that had medical exemptions.
And does that apply to the school buses? Because we need the metrics.
It is my understanding that the argument for why even in the mask optional counties, the school buses are still forcing the masks is because that is a federal mandate, and the school buses are means of federal transportation. Therefore, even in counties where kids are not masking during school hours, they have to wear a mask morning and evening on the bus.
Which we talk about again, as even Tara, when you're mixed with age groups or not, some of your own age groups, you can't identify anybody who might be bullying you or assaulting you.
Yeah, so a school bus is actually a really frightening place if you think about it, to have children wearing masks, because you've got one adult and dozens and dozens of children. And so I know even when I was a little girl, I mean, I certainly had multiple incidences on buses that happened with high school age boys when I was a very little girl. And I cannot imagine how much wearing a mask would probably have even
exasperated the situation.
Made those behaviors all the more emboldened, right? Because of the anonymity of a mask. So to answer your question, I have that question too. Can parents opt out under this new law that happened today of the mask exemption for their children on school buses? I don't know, that we don't have the answer to that question. That might be something for you to dig into, Sloan.
I'll put it on my ever-growing list.
Yeah, seriously, that's a good thing to dig into, because we've been told that we actually.
Or what happens with this metric system where 5% are supposedly exposed, and are they going to quarantine? Are they going to push the children out? What about the ones who are opting out of the mask? Are they going to take them and send them home and the other children not? And eventually it will probably come down to that, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, guys, I mean, I knew we were going to be on fire. I think we brought the fire tonight, but these are truths that need to be said. So I want to thank you guys, Two Citizens Moms. I mean, check them out on Telegram. Fearless Warriors. I mean, I love what they're doing. And again, Mindy, you guys, I mean, she really means what she says. They've helped so many people. They really have. And just thank you for all your work. And
reach out to us if you need anything. Please reach out to us. We always respond.
Yeah, definitely. They always do. And so any questions about medical freedom or how to prevent stuff or how to help with stuff. So good night to you guys. Take a look at that bill. And as with everything, keep fighting, keep showing up, keep going to school board meetings, keep making your voices heard, because other people need to hear it.
Thanks,
all right.
Sloan.
Thank you. Have a great night, you guys.
You too.